It's time for a dogfight between two hot high-end Android handsets on Verizon Wireless so you can pick them up on multiple carriers in the US. I'm Aaron Baker from PhoneDog.com. Today, it's the Note 3 and we're putting it up in a dogfight against the LG G2. Which one will come out on top? It's part one, and we'll start finding that out right now. It's a dogfight battle between two hot Android phones on Verizon, and you gotta forgive my voice. I'm still recovering from that cold I talked about a couple of days ago in videos, so forgive me if my voice is a little bit more gravelly than usual or a little bit more stuffy than usual. Two devices you've asked for this dogfight repeatedly, and now it's finally time to do it. It's the Samsung Galaxy Note 3 up against the LG G2, two Android phones, in this case, that are available on Verizon, but you can pick up, and these are obviously the Verizon variants, but you can pick up the G2 and the Note 3 on a multitude of other carriers, including Sprint, T-Mobile, and AT&T. So keep that in mind. This is just a comparison between two Verizon versions of the device for carrier consistency. Whenever I have both in the office, I try to do that. Before we get too far into this, I want to thank my partners at Best Buy Mobile for giving us devices like these for use in our One Paw Bandit giveaway game. When you go into Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out working. They'll make sure your email, your web, contacts, your settings, all that stuff are set up so when you walk out the door here, you're good to go, you're good to rock and roll at Best Buy Mobile. So here we go, Galaxy Note 3, and then we'll talk about specs primarily in part one and kind of what the phones offer, hardware, etc. And in part two, we'll talk more about the software experience between these two devices. Specs-wise on the Galaxy Note 3, improvements all around from the Galaxy Note 2. You've got a 2.3 gigahertz Snapdragon 800 CPU, a 5.7-inch 1080p HD display here, 3,200 milliamp hour battery, 3 gigabytes of RAM, so the first 3 gigabyte device to land in US markets, 32 gigabytes of available storage here, 4G LTE connectivity courtesy of Verizon, and a nice little faux leather, if you will, back on the back of the device to give it a feel of a notebook. It's a little bit more boxy and looks a lot like kind of the Samsung Galaxy S2, pulls that design language in as opposed to a continuation of the Galaxy S3 or the Galaxy S4, even of the Galaxy Note 2, kind of taking it back in terms of design a little bit and changing it up. Then you have the LG G2 here. This thing is packing a 2.3 gigahertz Snapdragon 800 CPU. So these are the two quad-core Snapdragon 800 devices that are available on a carrier in the US right now. It's got a 3,000 milliamp hour non-removable battery, so it is non-removable. This one is removable, keep that in mind. On the back, you got your power and volume rocker here on the back, which we'll talk about in just a second in the hardware bit, but 5.2-inch 1080p HD display, 2 gigabytes of RAM on this device, 4G LTE connectivity as well, 13 megapixel cameras on both of these units with 1080p HD recording capabilities and optical image stabilization. So you can see what the backs look like compared to each other. Now, design-wise, a little bit more rounded over here on the LG G2, a little bit more boxy on the Note 3, and just holding them side by side or on top of each other, rather, you can see the design differences here between the two units. On the Note 3, very similar to existing Samsung products. The Note 2, for example, the Galaxy S4, you've got your volume rocker on the left side, you've got your power button on the right side, and pulling a page from the Samsung Galaxy S4 design playbook, you can see that this is a little bit more boxy on the sides here, a little bit beefier, easier to hold. They did that with the Galaxy S4 versus the 3. If you remember, the 3 was very curved on the sides and felt a little bit more curvy in the hands. This is just a smidgen more boxy on the sides, which is nice because you can easily put your fingers on each side and hold it up while you're making a phone call. Same button down here at the bottom, physical home button, capacitive buttons over on the side, menu, and of course back as well, both of which can now be accessed by using the S Pen. This is a new feature that we saw on some of the more recent tablets, and now we're seeing it on the Note 3. We did not have this feature on the Note 2. I'll pull away Air Command here. And you can see I can click those capacitive buttons with my S Pen if I so desire. S Pen here as well, been redesigned, looks different, can be put in either way. We'll talk more about that towards the end of this video and into part two. The LG G2 over here, very revolutionary, at least from a design standpoint here. Power button and volume rocker on the back. Something different in terms of a design language standpoint. You got your camera back here as well. You'll notice the Verizon version is slightly different from the other GSM variants. And of course the unlocked variant, you can see here, got your SIM card slot, micro SIM card slot, and this one actually is not one that you need a tool to remove. You can stick your fingernail underneath. That's another change in the Verizon version. Over here, nothing. At the bottom, you've got your speaker and micro USB charging port. Again, different from the GSM variants and from the unlocked device as well. You've got the charging port down there at the bottom. You've got a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack down here as well. Up top, you've got your IR blaster for TV capabilities or for your remote capabilities on this unit. Very fast all around, and both of these devices are really zippy. You can notice the Verizon logos up here at the top on the G2. On the back, you got Galaxy Note 3 back here, and the Verizon and the 4G LTE logos back here in the back. This one is running Android 4.3. This one's running Android 4.2, both with their respective user interfaces. This is still running TouchWiz. This is running LG's UI. Both of them have seen improvements across the board from previous iterations of these devices. So G2 is an example. Improvements from the Optimus G Pro days even, which are not that long in the past. You've got improvements here to the user interface, and then you've got improvements over here to the user interface of TouchWiz as well that really maximize the S Pen and the use of the new display. So both of these have 1080p HD displays. And I should point out one of my favorite features on the G2, the double tap to turn the display on and off, also known as knock on, as you can see there. Turn it off, turn it back on, and easily access the device itself. Now over here, out of the box, you do get Verizon applications on both. On the Note 3, at least on the Verizon side, they're organized in a folder right out of the box. You've got My Verizon Mobile, Mobile Hotspot, Name ID, Visual Voicemail, NFL Mobile, Setup Wizard, Slacker, Verizon Tones, VZ Navigator, VZ Security, all that stuff. And then over here, you've got accessories. You got Amazon Kindle, Amazon MP3, App Store, Audible. You've got all that stuff that you would expect. Caller Name ID. You've got Mobile Hotspot over here. You've got Setup Wizard as well, and all the VZ stuff, Voicemail, VZ Navigator, VZ Security, Verizon Tones, and more. So you've got pretty much the same stuff on both of these units in terms of Verizon pre-installed applications. And you'll also notice, like I was just saying, out of the box, the Verizon variant does organize these into folders. So you can either move those out to create a more unified, if you will, app drawer, or you can keep them in their respective folders. But you've got Action Memo here. You've got Gear Manager because this thing does pair with the Samsung Galaxy Gear. And then over here, you've got all of your stuff out and not in folders out of the box, if that makes sense. So a little bit more of a larger app drawer over on the LG G2. Your widget shortcuts are over here as well on both units. You've got widget shortcut access, and then you've got settings over here, which I can add and remove stuff real time from the applications drawer if it's eligible to be removed. In this case, Quadrant Standard is the only thing that's eligible to be removed. Over here, you've got your widgets as well. You've got, of course, Action Memo, Active Apps Manager. I always enjoy going through these and seeing some of the different widgets because, at least with a skinned version of Android, if you will, there are some nice user interface touches, nice widget touches that come past stock Android. So you can see here, calendar, clock, email, Flipboard, Gmail, all kinds of different options for you to make this device your own. And very similarly over here on the G2, you've got a lot of options: games, games launcher, Gmail, Google Now, Google Posts, or Google Plus Posts rather, Rich Note, Task Manager, Slacker Radio, Weather, YouTube, and more. So kind of the same widget functionality over there as well. Now, widgets here, I can pinch, but it's not going to do anything. And then applications, same thing over here. Much like the home screen on TouchWiz, you can also pinch in the widgets area, for example, or pinch within the apps area and quickly see all of your pages of apps or your pages of widgets. It's a small touch. I find it to be pretty useful because I can easily scroll back up to the top here, or if I know that the widget, for example, starts with a Z, I can jump right down, or Y even, I can jump right back down to the bottom. On-screen buttons here on the G2, as you can see, one of the cool features of the G2, these are customizable. So for example, I can go into menu here, go into settings, and I can scroll down, and I'll turn this over into a tab view, which is what you would see. And for whatever reason, Verizon's devices out of the box are set in that standard view, that kind of list view, line item view, if you will. And that can be changed on both of these devices by switching to tab view, by hitting settings, or menu rather, in each settings area and switching those right over. So we'll go to sound here, we'll go to display, and we'll take a look at the front touch buttons. I can change these around. So let's say, for example, I'm coming from a Samsung device to the G2. I'm used to the menu button being on the left side, or I want to keep the standard G2 layout out of the box. I can change that. I can change the theme color. I've got lovely pink here, black gradation, and white. Change those around as I see fit, and use a transparent background if I want to as well. So I can make it like that. A lot of different options here. Now these do go away when you're watching videos, but they stay in place for most things on this device. So even though the display is 5.2 inches, keep in mind you might lose a little bit of screen real estate by having those on the display themselves. Over here you've got, again, your capacitive buttons, which can easily be accessed, or you can use the S Pen to access those. Now, comparing notification bars really quickly here, you've got similar shortcuts over in both. One of the things I like a lot about the Note 3, the ability to customize those. So I can jump right in here, see all of my shortcuts, I can edit, and let's say, you know what, I use airplane mode all the time because I'm constantly traveling for work. I can throw airplane mode right up there in the top, and then I can scroll back down and airplane mode is right there, and I can scroll over to use my most frequently used quick access toggles rather. Over here, kind of a similar option. I can go to edit. I can go up here and say, you know what, airplane mode is pretty important to me, so I'm going to throw this sucker up to the top and kick it right back out. And then there is airplane mode right over there on the left side as well. Other differences include brightness area over here out of the box in the Note 3. You don't get that out of the box over here. You got your settings button on both units to quickly access your menu. Android 4.3, Android 4.2 running over here. But otherwise, kind of similar in some ways across the board. So we'll take a look at the browser here. We use the Samsung browser over here. We use Chrome. You can see PhoneDog's already loaded up, and you can see what their respective keyboards look like. Now, LG's keyboard over here on a 5.2-inch display. Samsung's new keyboard over here on the Galaxy Note 3, 5.7 inches, excuse me, is a nice sweet spot for people that want to do content consumption. So if you're that person that wants to type on a regular basis, you want to browse the web, you want to look at videos on a daily basis, 5.7 may be a great sweet spot for you, and this is going to maximize space for the keyboard. Over here, 5.2 still great for a lot of people. LG says that's the largest you can get and still hold it one-handed, at least that's what they said in their press conference for the G2. I'll go over here to phonedog.com, and I'll go to phonedog.com over here as well just to reload those up and take a look at the different keyboards. Number rows on both of these devices, as you can see right there. Overall, I tend to find, and this is a cool little thing here, I've got my forward and back buttons right down here at the bottom. But one thing I find this new Samsung keyboard to be incredibly responsive. The autocorrect is good. So we're seeing that on this device, excuse me for my sniffling and clearing my throat, but a nice keyboard all around here. Very nice over here, a nice improvement for LG, but in the keyboard department, I would give it to the Note 3, the Note 3. Stay tuned for part 2 of the Note 3 versus LG G2 battle. We'll talk about the user interface and more, so keep it locked right here on phonedog.com.